Heidi-ho. Hello, I'm just in the Canadian tuxedo. Welcome to the channel. Today we'll be talking about the new album by Jack White entitled Fear of the Dawn. Fear of the Dawn is Jack White's fourth studio album, recorded in his home studio and is mostly performed by Jack himself. I get the sense that Jack White is the kind of person who sees something as the sum of its parts. He needs to understand every part's subtlety and nuance, and then needs to push it to its limits. He's a craftsman and a showman, and this mentality spreads into his work as an artist and musician. This album is one bizarre and exhilarating trip. It sees Jack exploring and experimenting with elements of music in ways that we really haven't heard him do before. That's not to say that these elements haven't been experimented with before, just not through the lens of Jack White. Up until recently, his work has been mostly analog and on tape, highlighting the eccentricities and working within those confines. Here, we see Jack diving headfirst into the digital realm. The thing is that the principles are the same, it's just the mediums have different limitations. All over this album, we hear all sorts of manipulated sounds, intricate edits, and creative song structures. I see this album as Jack playing to his musical strengths, but also playing against type. He flirts with blues, hip-hop, dub, reggae, metal, and of course rock, and he often juxtaposes these genre staples against one another. This album has a variety of colorful sounds, but still manages to feel cohesive. It feels like a body of work that's meant to be taken wholly, as opposed to song by song. Jack doesn't seem like he's concerned with standard songwriting and structures. These are not top 40 rock songs. This album is a statement. It's a carefully, cleverly crafted piece of art. Jack wants to take you for a ride, and all you gotta do is trust that he's gonna take you somewhere interesting. So let's dive into the album, shall we? Taking Me Back opens the album with some bizarre harmonized guitars before dropping us into a very digital, almost synth-like fuzz guitar riff. This song is loaded with modulated drum delays, Velcro-like fuzzes, harmonized and pitch-shifted lead guitars. The drums have this tight room sound, but they're also very digitally manipulated. I hear a lot of the kinds of effects that were prevalent in early electronic dance music and hip-hop. Specifically the way loops are used, filtered, distorted, and twisted. There are also some synth elements here, which is very interesting and a new element for Jack. This song opens the record in a big way, showing you that this is not the Jack White record you've heard before. It's a really cool opener. Without missing a beat, we are dropped into the garage rock meets heavy metal of Fear of the Dawn. This song takes a single groove and riffs the hell out of it. And boy, is it a gnarly riff. Jack's vocal on this is one of his best since the White Stripes' Elephant days, and it has this sort of Black Sabbath vibe to it. All over this track we get theremin, screaming guitar leads. This is probably one of the more typical Jack White sounding tracks, but damn does it rip. It goes by really fast, but not a second is spared. I love it. The next track, The White Raven, is bookended with these quiet riffs before dropping us into something that sounds like a cross between Rob Zombie and 80s ZZ Top. Weird, right? But it works. The guitar sounds like it might not even be a guitar. It sounds like some 80s synth trying to be a guitar. And just when you've settled into that sound, we get another groove with a velvety fuzz that sounds like it's trying to be some kind of like bari sax. There are some wild tones on this song, being manipulated like they were analog-like synths. Jack's vocal soars all over this chaos, and at one point, there's even a weird-sounding choir. Heidi-ho comes in sounding like they're trying to introduce a character out of like some sci-fi spaghetti western in hell. It sounds like Sergio Leone scoring Star Trek. It's really epic and really cool, with fuzzy guitars and feedback and roomy drums. And then there's this creatively used Callaway sample. Oh, and that's just the intro. When the groove comes in, there's this funky little bass riff, and then we get a nice guest vocal rap from Q-Tip. Jack creates a beat that is very reminiscent of like Raza, but he does it by creating parts rather than just sampling them. But then he treats them as if they were samples. Has this like cut and paste fashion to it. There's claps, an acoustic guitar, and a weird arpeggiated synths. The groove on this track is infectious, and it's a real standout on the album. It's a fun collaboration and one of the best tracks on the record. Eosophobia sees Jack dabble in dub music, but then he crosses it with something that feels like The Who. The use of delay is really cool. There are so many different instances of it all over the track. It can be heard on the drums, giving it that reggae dub vibe. It's used on guitars to create interesting harmonies, and then used on vocals to great effect and oscillate and spin out of control. There are some funky riffs that have sort of a post-punk vibe to them. There are great passages on electric piano and organ, and there are these great guitar freakouts that are like something off of The Who's Tommy. The end of the song culminates in a big fuzzy breakdown. Into the Twilight comes in with this weird a cappella bit, and then we launch into what is like a cross between Depeche Mode and Sign of the Times era Prince. This song is groovy as hell and has a strong connection to like dance music. There are heavily compressed drums and thumping bass and chunky guitars being laid over top of a funky rock groove. And I'm also pretty sure that Jack White gets away with using the Miku pedal, which is this really bizarre vocal-like pedal that came out. And it works better than it should. And he actually gets away with it. It's a fun and wild track loaded with wild and wacky guitar ad-libs and vocal samples. I love the organ parts on this track as well. This song somehow manages to take some very dated sounds of like the late 80s and early 90s and then pulls them into the future. It's one of the weirdest tracks on the album, but it's really cool. We get a quick little interlude called Dusk. This theme appears later again in the record, but in a different context. It's very pretty with guitars, glockenspiel, and vibraphone. It's a nice breath in the middle of this wild record. Next we get What's the Trick, which feels a bit like The Name of the Game by Crystal Method. There's a funky syncopated drum part that I think might actually be two different drummers playing with each other. There's a lot of allusions to 90s hip-hop here, and there's almost a Tom Morello vibe to the riff on this song. There are all kinds of filter sweeps and oddly affected parts. There's this awesome point where Jack screams, and it feeds back into oscillating noise. Jack rants and raves over this thing, and I have no idea what the hell he's going on about, but it's compelling. It kind of harkens back to some of like the early White Stripes records. This song gives me like some serious stink face too. I love it. That Was Then and This Is Now comes in with some Beatle-like harmonies and a swung beat that has a catchy riff as well. Then the groove breaks down and gets funky with some cool organ and drum ad-libs. Eventually we get another quick switch up, which sounds like a funky version of Self-Esteem by Offspring. It's a weird turn, but damn is it fun. And it's interesting that Jack manages to get a lot of mileage out of just one riff. It's like going to a restaurant and getting a dish served to you 3 ways. Roll! 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 We get a reprise of Eosophobia, which feels more like a jam session. Jack flexes his Guitar Hero playing skills with some crazy delay arpeggios and some seriously juicy bluesy solos over a dub groove. This track works better than it really has any right to, but I think it comes down to the incredible chemistry between Jack and the other musicians on this album. Morning, Noon, and Night has a stomping funk groove that kind of reminds me of ZZ Top's Tres Hombres. There's a really great pocket in this track, and then there's an organ solo section. This song gives me some 70s bluesy rock vibes. Jack solos with some crazy colorful leads. When we come to the outro of the song, we are reintroduced to the Dusk Interlude, which the band fades out and slowly back in as if to show you that there's a clever connection between these tracks. There is something very haunting about Shedding My Velvet. There are some cool electric pianos and some kinda Clapton meets David Gilmour-esque licks all over this. The beat has like a boom bap kind of vibe to it. At times, this song makes me think of Fame by David Bowie, and then when the song closes out, we're just left with Jack and his acoustic guitar. It's a cool and dark way to close out this record, and I imagine this is meant to set up the next record he's releasing in July. All in all, I think this is a really exciting Jack White record. I think it's cool that at this point in his career, he still manages to pull some twists and turns that, you know, as a listener, you're not expecting. And he doesn't really even need to. He could have just released something that was safe and, you know, would have given us some more anthemic blues rock, but he still manages to continue to challenge his fan base and always seems to throw things at you that you're just not ready for. For me, this was the most exciting record I've heard him put out since Elephant. I haven't been the largest fan of some of his solo work, It just doesn't do much for me. But this album, on the other hand, just grabs your attention and always seems to throw you surprises. And for me, that's a lot of fun. And this is a really artful record. It's a really hard record to explain without hearing it, because there's a lot of different things going on all over the place. You kind of just need to listen to the record. And I don't think you'll be disappointed. At the very least, you'll be very intrigued. I'm gonna give this album 5 denim jackets out of 5. The first 5 I've ever given, but this record is really cool, and I think it's gonna stand in his discography as a classic. Thanks for watching. If you like what you see, like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments what records are you into right now, and what record should I review next. Stay weird, my friends, and I'll catch you on the B-side.